It's been Donald Trump's favorite line since the start of the impeachment investigation.
There's no quid pro quo. There's no quid pro quo. There is no pro quo.
But today we learned the guy who'd previously testified before congressional investigators that the president told him to send that text message assuring there was no quid pro quo has now admitted, in fact, there was. Transcripts released this afternoon revealed that Ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, updated his original testimony yesterday, saying he has refreshed his recollection about his dealings with Ukraine and now recalls telling an aide to Ukraine's president the resumption of U.S. aid would likely not occur until Ukraine provided the public anti-corruption statement that we'd been discussing for many weeks. So basically, what he's saying is
quid pro quo.
The transcript of Sondland's original testimony also reveals that he thought that exchange was improper. And when pushed as to whether he thought it was illegal, he responded, quote, "I'm not a lawyer, but I assume so." The cascade of transcripts coming out this week are telling us a lot we didn't know, like that former ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who Trump bragged about firing, says she felt threatened by Trump and what she called a concerted campaign against her. She told the congressional panels, quote, "One of the senior Ukrainian officials was very concerned and told me I really needed to watch my back and they were going to, do things, including to me." And despite it all, the slew of Democrats looking to beat Trump at the ballot box are largely trying to stay above the fray, focusing on the campaign trail. Joined now by Congressman Seth Moulton, who declared an end to his own presidential bid in August and is running for re-election in the 6th District. Congressman, it's good to see you.
Good to be back.
So after Sondland's reversal, are there any of the 194 House Republicans who voted unanimously against the impeachment resolution who think that there wasn't a quid pro quo? Is anybody really believe that anymore?
I mean, I don't think so. But some of these guys are just living in la-la land and trying to blindly support the president. But what you saw with Ambassador Sondland's testimony, and remember, this was one of Trump's guys, a political appointee, not someone who worked his way up. $1 million donation
to the inauguration.
Exactly. He didn't work his way up through public service in the State Department. He just gave a lot of money to Trump, got the job, tried to cover the president's tracks, and realized he's on the wrong side of history, so he changed his mind or suddenly
refreshed his recollection.
That's right.
So can we go back to the Republicans for a minute? I asked most of your Democratic colleagues this, but you have special credentials. You were rated, top 10% most bipartisan Congress people a couple of, 2017, I think. So you work with these people regularly.
Absolutely.
Is Trump right that he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue? There's not one of these men and women who thinks there should at least be an inquiry?
No, that's wrong. But he's right that a good number of them, a good percentage of them, will just go along with whatever he says. And it's the same with his base in this country. And that's why it's so important that, when we think about how to win elections here, we don't focus on converting his base, but we talk about the folks in the middle who might change their minds.
Well, forget the election for a minute. How about the impeachment inquiry? A lot of optimistic Democrats, fellow colleagues of yours, say, well, look back at Nixon, it took this, took the Supreme Court. Is there any reason to think that anything will shake loose a Republican other than maybe one here or there, no matter what the evidence that's brought out here?
I think you're starting to see it in the Senate. I think you're starting to see very guarded statements from many of our senators who are trying to look at their place in history. Remember, in 50 or 100 years, Americans will look back at today, and they probably won't even remember who won the 2020 election, but they will remember whether the United States Congress in 2019 and 2020 said that a president could be above the law.
I thought of you this weekend. I read this horrible story in the New York Times. You served 4 tours of duty in Iraq, as people know, worked closely with Iraqi translators who risked their lives. One of them actually came to this country, I think, lived with your parents. These numbers are unbelievable. Almost 10,000, 9,829 translators or cultural advisors were admitted as refugees from Iraq in this country in 2014. Only 153 last year, 110,000 on a waiting list. So how does anybody who's willing to be courageous and take a chance, after looking at what we did to the Kurds, looking at what we did to people like you work with in Iraq, why would anyone trust this country to ever repay their obligation to them down the line?
I'm very worried that they won't. And that will put American troops at risk. That Americans will die because we will be unable to get these critical partners on the ground in the future. Because I've had these conversations. I've had to look Iraqis in the eye and say, you've got to trust me. Why should I work with you, Seth? Trust me, we've got your back. If someone comes after you, we'll get you out of there. And that's what I've done, not just for one translator, the Mohammed who came and lived with my family in Marblehead, but several translators who I helped come to the United States. That's the promise that our troops make to these men and women who are willing to risk their lives.
If you did a 5th tour of duty next week and a translator asked you the same question, what would you say to him or her?
It's a good question, Jim, because, I mean, look, it's our credibility as a nation. It's the personal credibility of troops on the line. You know, I'd have to make much more of a personal commitment and say I personally will do whatever I can because I wouldn't have faith in my commander-in-chief, and that's a terrible position to be in as someone risking your life for your country.
Can we stay in the military for 1 second? I'm curious to your reaction to what former Secretary of Defense General Mattis had to say at a dinner a couple of weeks ago. Here's General Mattis.
I'd earned my spurs on the battlefield, Martin, as you pointed out, and Donald Trump earned his spurs in a letter from a doctor.
56% of veterans, an overwhelming majority, support Donald Trump, who I think I don't think this is anything but factual, is a draft dodger. And a former Secretary of Defense and a general says this, admittedly in humor, but obviously a lot of truth there. Why is there overwhelming support for Donald Trump amongst men and women you serve with in this country?
I can't speak for all veterans. I would never do that. But what a lot of friends of mine say to me is they just say, look, Seth, we get the fact that this guy tramples all over the Constitution. We don't admire him, but he's better than the alternatives. And there's a lot of frustration among veterans with the Democratic Party. And that's why I ran. That's why I'm out there saying that Democrats can be the party of making America safe and strong. That's why we've got to have an aggressive, forward-looking national security policy. I just inaugurated the Future of Defense Task Force to talk about how we can meet the challenges of the next 50 years. And that's the kind of leadership that we need to see on national security in our party.
Is it fair to say your presidential campaign was wildly unsuccessful? Is that an unfair statement? It was, yes?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Why would you not?
Because the response that we got on the ground was fantastic. I got in the race too late. And, I mean, at a town hall in Ipswich just last night, people were saying, Seth, I wish you were still in there. This is the kind of leadership we need. Look, the bottom line is that I'm not afraid to get into a long shot bid and risk losing.
For Congress,
but I did that to run for Congress. I'm always going to do what I think is best for the country. That's the bottom line. I think that we've got to beat Donald Trump, and I didn't think there was a better foil for him than a young combat veteran. That's not an option now, but you know what? We got to just make sure we win.
A young combat veteran who I think admitted publicly for the first time that you suffered from post-traumatic stress. So how hard is that to talk about publicly?
Well, it's not anymore, but frankly, the only reason I hadn't admitted it until this campaign is because I didn't find the courage to do so. And I have a lot of admiration for the veterans, many of them younger than me, who have spoken out even before I did. But the response has been tremendous. Look, I thought it might end my political career by admitting that. And frankly, I did it partly because I just figured, look, if I'm running for president, this is going to come out anyway, and I'd rather it come out on my terms. But the response from fellow veterans, Vietnam veterans, who said to me, Seth, I've never talked about my story until now, since it happened back in the 1960s. People who have never served in the military but have had mental health struggles who said, Seth, now I'm going to go get help. It's been incredible. It's I think the single most important thing I did in running for president.
Why haven't you endorsed anybody, including the hometown favorite?
Well, look, I'm just.
Elizabeth Warren.
I've been very focused on the 6th District of Massachusetts, and I love
your
my
fellow
job.
Congress people are focused on their jobs too. Almost all of them are endorsing candidates, are they not?
Well, I mean, look, at some point at the right time, I'll weigh in.
You don't like Medicare for all, do you?
I'm not a fan. I think that competition is good. I think that if you want a public option, you should be able to choose it, but it should be a choice.
So does that mean if you were to endorse, you wouldn't endorse Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders because of that?
No, I'm not going to be a single issue voter.
Okay, let's talk about another woman, if we can, for a minute. A woman who you thought should lose her job. You called her arrogant in Rolling Stone. You called her out of touch in a lot of places. It's time for new leadership. Obviously, Nancy Pelosi survived, and a lot of people think she has thrived in this impeachment situation. Would you say the same things about Nancy Pelosi today that you said when you helped lead the challenge to her speakership?
I've never said anything that's untrue. Integrity is incredibly important to me. But that doesn't mean that you can't be effective at standing up to this president, and she's done a marvelous job of doing so. Now, I think that really her shining moments have been in these one-on-one meetings with the president in the Oval Office. I think that the impeachment inquiry got off to a little bit of a rough start. And to be perfectly honest, I thought it should start a lot earlier. I was the first politician in Massachusetts to come out and say that we should start this inquiry, because I don't want the conclusion at the end of the day to be, go ahead, President of the United States, you can obstruct justice. You can profit off the office, which is violating the emoluments clause of the Constitution. You can publicly call on a foreign adversary to investigate your political rivals, but just don't leverage foreign aid, because then you'll get impeached. I think that's the wrong message to come out of this. The message should be that nobody in America, including the President of the United States, is above the law.
You know, I said you'd say the exact same things very quickly. When I asked you on the radio, was it about age? You said absolutely not. She's going to be an 80-year-old speaker soon. Joe Biden would be an 80-year-old president. Bernie Sanders would be an 80-year-old president, give or take a year. Is that a problem or no?
Look, I think younger people in America need representatives as well. And I remember doing a town hall up in Amesbury in the midst of this crisis, and a high school student came and said, you know, Seth, do you know why I support your call for new leadership? Because I go to school every single day afraid that I'm going to get shot, and I don't think older people understand that. And people like that in America, this amazing, courageous young woman who's in high school in Amesbury, like they deserve to be represented as well.
So I'll take that as a maybe. It's good to see you, Seth Moulton.
Good to see you too,
Thanks
Jim.
so much, Congressman Seth Moulton.